So friends, first came cosmogenesis and then came anthropogenesis. First, the heavens and the earth had to be emanated, constructed, in order for evolution to take place. And it said, the universe exists solely for the evolution of the soul. That all must pass through the human stage of the crucial midway point of soul evolution. The crucial midway point between the lower and the higher kingdoms. And there is a Kabalistic maxim which goes, a stone becomes a plant becomes an animal becomes a man, the man becomes a spirit, and the spirit becomes a god. So in a nutshell, we have here the whole course of evolution from the lower kingdoms to the highest. Man is both animal and divine in one being. And they meet in the middle and in the manas, what we call manas principle, the fifth principle, which is the mind, the principle of the mind, the faculty of thinking, of reason. The animals have instinct, man has instinct plus reason. So the course of evolution, we could say, began after the cosmogenesis, which is symbolically expressed in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, built by the builders, the Elohim, who constructed the angelic hierarchies, who built or who emanated the universe according to the Logos, the divine plan. First came the elemental kingdom, then the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and then man. And it said that all are either incipient or perfected men. Incipient, latent, potentially, or perfected men as the angelic hierarchies, or the Dhyani Chohans. Human evolution proceeds through 7 root races and 49 subraces. Each root race has 7 subraces. A root race corresponds to a world epoch and civilization. For example, the Atlantean epoch was known, was known as the 4th root race, but it comprised 7 subraces. The Atlantic epoch lasted several million years. So obviously each subrace embodied a new civilization, a different aspect, a dominance of a particular subrace. And for example, the last subrace before the flood was known as the Mongolians, from which the Chinese, Eskimos and American Indian races are descended. The cyclic rise and fall of continents, planetary and climate change is linked with the evolution of new races, species and civilizations. We are now in the fifth subrace of the 5th root race, known as the Aryan. This is the post-diluvian world epoch or culture. The 5th root subrace known as the European. There have been 4 since the flood, or the first subrace being the Indian. And it said that eventually all will become adepts when the Manas principle is fully developed by the 7th root race, which will be many hundreds of thousands of years from now. It said the seed of the 6th subrace is being planted in America, in the American continent, is being gradually will evolve from the mixture of all the different races and cultures who have settled there. And we could say that each, not only each root race, but each subrace develops a different quality or aspect of human nature, expresses that, whether it be intellectual or physical strength, psychic powers, or whatever. And yes, we could say that all are the incipient or perfected men. Now this applies universally to all races who have reached the halfway human stage, whatever form physically, whether humanoid or otherwise. It's said that man is spread, or humanity is spread throughout the cosmos, not just on this one tiny planet on the edge of the galaxy. Life is spread throughout the universe in one form or another, at different levels of intelligence and evolution. But the experiment of humanity takes place throughout the cosmos. Not much could be said in the 19th century on this point, but it is alluded to in a few places that there are myriad Earths in the cosmos. In the early races, man was still ethereal, non-physical, as was the Earth itself. So in the first three and a half, well, we are in the fourth globe now of the chain of 7. The early globes and races were ethereal, and until we reach the middle of the fourth root race, the Atlantean root race, when the Earth and the man himself reached his period of the most densest physicality. Men and animals in those early races were gigantic, were as alluded to in all the mythologies regarding the Titans and the giants. The fifth root race of smaller stature, and that seemed to be the trend for the future races as well. We speak of the first race as being protoplasmic, almost formless, ethereal, almost the original shape of man was actually globular or circular. And later on, the Hyperboreans, and then the third root race were known as the Lemurian. By that stage, they had evolved into the mindless gigantic apes, and at a certain point when they reached a level of we could say, physical and psychic sophistication, the principle of self-consciousness, the power of thinking, of reasoning, the Manas principle was awakened in them. This happened in the fifth subrace of the third root race. How was this achieved? This was achieved through the descent of the Manasa Putras, or the incarnation of the sons of the universal mind, from higher planes through the operation of karmic law into the nascent animal or human forms. Now this corresponds to the biblical legend of the fall, of the fallen angels who supposedly rebelled against God and were cast out of heaven. And we could also say that prior to the lighting of the Manas, another crucial evolutionary stage was reached. This was the splitting of the sexes into two sexes. Prior to that, the protean human races, as was the first Adam, was just one sex, or the hermaphrodite. They reproduce themselves through different processes for example, budding was one, sweat-born was another, egg-born was another. But this was followed on because this was the animal form of reproduction, and as symbolized by the allegory of Eve being created from Adam's rib. So the one sex split into two, and the form of reproduction became the animal reproduction as we know today. So the sons of the universal mind, or the gods, beheld the daughters of men and found them comely, and they took wives among them. So again, in allegorical form, this was the descent of the Manasa Putras, or the fallen angels, into the animal men of that epoch. A descent, we say, not a fall, necessary to further human evolution on this planet. We could say it's also alluded to by the allegory of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. When they ate of the forbidden fruit, they became self-conscious, they became aware they were naked, and they became afraid. There are different ways to interpret that allegory, apart from the very negative one of which Christianity does. It was a necessary stage in evolution. The Adam and Eve of that time were, we could say, the early human race, or they symbolize the early human race who lived in Eden, which was a higher astral plane, not a place on the earth, as the literally. So from the midway through the fourth race, humanity is gradually growing again more and more ethereal. It was said earlier that three lines of evolution meet in man: the monadic, the manasic, and the atmic. The monadic, or the spirit spark, which is the impulse for evolution, drives the force of evolution through the lower planes, through the lower kingdoms, from the mineral up to man, from which point we have the manasic stream, the lighting up of the manas, or the power of the mind, and we have the atmic, which is a ray of the universal spirit latent in man himself, which when we reunite with, or we join with, as in symbolized in yoga, in union with the divine, then we become one with the divine again. We return to our source. So it's the downward arc. We heard about the downward arc of involution, from the first globe down to the fourth, or the most ethereal plane down to the most physical, and then the upward arc, man becomes a man, and not just man, but the earth itself, more and more, gradually more and more ethereal, on the journey back to the spiritual ideal, or the spiritual man, the cosmic man, the true man, in fact. We should remember we are those fallen angels, although we have largely forgotten it. From now on, as was said, now that man has free will within certain parameters, he has the thinking principle, he can accelerate or slow down his own evolution through self-devised means and efforts by his own actions. So the rest is up to us.